At the heart of editing with Adobe Premiere Pro, there are essentially two kinds of edit, two ways of having clips interact in a sequence that you are creating. And those two ways are insert and overwrite. I'm going to show you in this video the long way round, the detailed steps to choose where a clip's going to go. There are lots of shortcuts. You can drag with the mouse. We'll look at that in another tutorial. But if you understand this basic principle of inserting and overwriting, you're kind of halfway there to editing with any non-linear editing system like Premiere Pro. So I have a sequence here called Travelogue. It's just got one clip in it, which is a gull. I don't think there's much audio. Can't see much going on in the waveform. And over in the project panel, I've got a few other clips I want to add. And the first one I want to add is already open here in the source monitor. And if I just scrub on the time ruler here, I can see there's not much going on, but it's kind of a perfect second shot to go in my sequence. What I'm going to need to do is tell Premiere Pro where I want the new clip to go in terms of time and in terms of space, so in terms of the track it's going to land on. First of all, let me choose a part of it. This is a 12-second and 15-frame clip, so I'm going to take just a piece of this and pressing I, and then I'll just take about there. I'm going to press an O. You should make proper creative choices, unlike me. I'm just showing you where the buttons are here. So I've now chosen the beginning and end of the part of the clip that I want, and the next thing I'm going to do is tell Premiere Pro where to put that clip when I click the appropriate button. So down in the timeline panel, I don't have to take the next step. I can just use the playhead as the location to put the clip. But again, I want to show you the long way around. I'm going to position my playhead at the end of the clip that's here. Now there's a shortcut for doing this. If you press the down arrow and up arrow on the keyboard, the playhead will jump between the edits in your sequence. So I know by pressing the down arrow, my playhead is lined up perfectly. Now I'm not going to use the playhead, actually. I'm going to add an in point in the sequence. I'm going to press the I key here, and you can see I get this icon much like the one at the beginning of the selection in the source monitor. When you have an in point in the timeline panel, as I do now, Premiere Pro will use that in point as the alignment, if you like, as the positioning for the clip. It'll ignore the playhead. Again, you can just use the playhead, but I want you to see what we're about to perform is a classic three-point edit. Point number one is the in point here. Point number two is the out point. That sets the duration. And point number three is the in point, which will be aligned with the in point in the clip. So when I click the button to add the clip to the sequence, Premiere Pro will place the clip, or at least this part of the clip, here where the in point is. This is a classic three-point edit. Now, I need to make a decision whether I'm going to insert or overwrite. An insert edit will push things out of the way to make room for the clip that's being added, and an overwrite edit will just lay over the top. It's like way back in the day with recording on videotape. In this instance, there's actually nothing there to interact with, so it doesn't make much difference. At the bottom of the source monitor, there's a button to insert and a button to overwrite. There's keyboard shortcuts in brackets for both. I'm just going to click and add the clip. And you can see I've now got both clips in the sequence. Where insert and overwrite gets a bit more interesting is with placing content inside an existing sequence between clips. So I'm going to press the up arrow here. I'm just going to click into the timeline panel, position my playhead, and let's open another shot. Here we go. Let's take this one. I'll mark it with an in point and an out point. Well, that's pretty short, isn't it? A second. Let's take a little bit more. Now, what I skipped over earlier is these buttons here. The buttons on the left represent the available tracks in the clip, video 1 and audio 1. The buttons on the right represent the tracks available in the sequence. They're lined up next to each other, and that's why the clips are landing on these tracks. If I drag this clip up here, you'll see that now when I apply the edit, the clip I add is going to be added to the V2 track instead. So very straightforward to choose where your content's going to go. Now look what happens if I overwrite. So I'm clicking the overwrite button, and you can see the new clip I've added has written over the top of the second clip, the mid-beach shot. I'll just undo with Command-Z or Control-Z on Windows, and look what happens when I insert instead. Now the second clip is moved out of the way, and that is the difference between insert and overwrite. It's pretty straightforward. One lays over the top and one pushes things out of the way. There's a few other ways of interacting with sequences, but they all pretty much sit on these two ideas of shuffling things around or just laying things on top or lifting them away for that matter. So we've looked at using the buttons to insert clips or overwrite clips into sequences, and generally speaking, using the keyboard to do that, that's the comma key or the period key, is the quickest way to work. You'll find that if you can navigate through your media using the keyboard and hit keys to add content to your sequence, it'll be the fastest way to work. But very often, people prefer to drag with the mouse, and there are a couple of approaches to this. In the last lesson, I mentioned that essentially every edit you perform in Premiere Pro, in one way or another, it's going to be an insert or an overwrite. It's going to push things out of the way or it's not. And the same applies when you're dragging things into a sequence. I've got a clip already open here in the source monitor. This is called Evening Smile. You can see up at the top left corner. And I've already added in and out points to this. I've got a 3-second duration selected. I'm going to drag the clip into the sequence, and when I'm doing so, Premiere Pro is going to snap the clip segment, it's going to snap the content to existing elements in the sequence. So that could be the playhead or the beginning or end of a clip, for example, or if I have an in or an out point added, I'll be able to snap to those as well. This feature works because of this button right here. This is the Snap in Timeline button with the keyboard shortcut S. If you turn this off, Premiere Pro won't snap things together. I'll show you what this means. So I'm going to set out to insert this clip between the first and second clips in my sequence because that's what my creative genius dictates. I've looked at my media and I've decided this is the best way for me to work. So what I'm going to do is just drag from the middle of the source monitor down into the timeline. And you'll notice as I drag, you can feel it more than see it really. You can see the clip snaps into position with things. Now, when you're using the keyboard or you're clicking the buttons, you can specify which track a clip will land on when you press those buttons. But when you're dragging, you can just drop them where you want. And you can see that as I drag, for example, between the video 2 and video 3 tracks here, the audio is reciprocating and it's going to be dropped on the audio 2 or audio 3 tracks. Now at the moment I'm just dragging, so I'm going to drop the clip right here and look what happens when I release the mouse. So I'm releasing there and you can see I've actually lost the second clip altogether. It's completely gone. And that's because I've performed an overwrite edit. So I'll just undo with Command Z here on macOS. That'll be Control Z on Windows. I'm going to drag down again, and this time before I release the mouse, I'm going to press and hold the Command key here on macOS. This would be the Control key on Windows. Now I'm holding that modifier key, and while I'm holding the modifier key down, I'm going to release the mouse. And when I do so, you can see the clip has been inserted, pushing the other clips out of the way. So we've got these two modes, right? We've got overwrite, just drop things into the timeline. They'll replace anything that's underneath them. And we've got insert that will push things out of the way. And you can access that by holding down Command on macOS or Control in Windows. I'll just undo again with Control or Command Z. And you can actually drag straight from the project panel. So here's that Evening Smile clip. I'm going to drag this over, and it works just the same way. I'm going to hold down Command here on macOS, Control in Windows, and I'm going to release the mouse, and I've now added that clip. In fact, you can use the keyboard shortcuts, comma and period, to add content to sequences from the project panel in just the same way. So if I just press the down arrow here to position my playhead, and we've got this sitting tree clip, so I'll just select that here in the project panel. One click, notice that the project panel has a blue outline, so it's the active panel, and then I'm going to press comma to insert that clip. Well, it's a little bit long. I'm going to want to shorten it, but you can see how quickly and easily you can add content to a sequence. Down at the bottom of the sequence, we've got a navigator. See, I can drag this along, and if you drag the ends of the navigator, you can zoom in and out to get a better view of your content. You can also press the backslash key, that's usually on the right-hand side of a keyboard, and the backslash key will toggle to view the current sequence in full in the timeline panel. When you are moving or removing clips from sequences, the principles are basically the same as when you're adding them. You're still going to work in an insert mode or an overwrite mode. Plus, there's also an option to use in and out points, and I'll show you both. So let's say, for example, I've got a clip here that I want to move earlier, and I could drop it in the middle of the shot before. Maybe that's just what I feel is going to work best for this content. If I drag over here, I could drop it onto a different track. I suppose it would just be in front then. But if I drag it into the middle of the clip and release the mouse, I'm going to perform what's called a lift edit. That means removing content and leaving a gap behind, followed by an overwrite edit, just laying it over the top. If I drag this back to its original position, I've got snapping turned on, so everything's going to snap into position perfectly. You can see it leaves a gap behind where previously it was the middle of the other clip. So this is an overwrite edit, just laying on top by dragging with the mouse. When I moved the clip in the first place, I performed a lift edit, and a lift just erases the section of the track that the clip is on to begin with. So I'm going to undo and undo again here. You can also drag while holding Command on macOS or Control in Windows, and this will still perform a lift where the clip was originally. It's not going to close the gap here. It won't shuffle things around, but it will push the existing content out of the way. So this is actually inserted into the middle of that Sitting Tree 001 clip. It may be that you don't want to leave a gap, so I'm just going to undo again. I'm just pressing Command-Z or Control-Z, and I'm going to drag again, and this time I'm going to hold Command and Option at the same time. This would be Control-Alt on Windows. And while holding those keys, I'm going to release. And this will then perform what's called an extract edit first. That'll close the gap, so there's no space left in the timeline panel, followed by an insert edit. So in this way, you can just shuffle things around whenever you want by holding those two modifier keys. Now I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm going to undo again. And this time, I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut to select this clip with in and out points, and that's the / key. Now the / key will zoom in and out in the timeline so you can view your contents, but the / key will add an in point in the sequence at the beginning of the clip or multiple clips. Here I can lasso across multiple clips here and press the / key. Whatever you've got selected, you get an in point at the beginning and an out point at the end. I'll just deselect by clicking on the background in the timeline panel here, an empty track. Select this clip and press the / key. Now the in and out points in a sequence work in the same way that they do in the source monitor. You can specify the beginning and the end of the bit that you're interested in. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'll mark an in point with the I key here and an out point with the O key, so you can see what happens right in the middle of a clip. I'll just deselect, so there's no clip selected. I've just got my in and out points. And you can see what happens when I perform a lift or an extract edit. While we're working on a sequence, it's this right-hand stack of buttons that does everything. The left-hand stack is for your available source tracks, but the right-hand stack is the tracks that we're going to make changes to in this sequence. These two tracks are empty, so it doesn't really matter if they're off or on, but I'm going to keep the Video One and audio tracks selected. They're called targeted in Adobe language, and I've got my in and out points, which means I've now got kind of crosshairs on my media. The in point and the out point are specifying when, and the track targeting buttons are specifying what. So now if I click here to perform a lift edit, you can see I get a gap. So I'm just erasing that section of the sequence. Doesn't matter whether I'm getting a whole clip or not. I'm just erasing part of my content. I'll just undo, and now I'm going to click to extract, and you can see what happens. The timeline snaps, shuffling around and closing the gap. Now there are multiple ways of achieving the same things in Premiere Pro. I've just shown you how to drag things around. I'll just undo that. You can also select a clip and hit delete or backspace. You see that leaves a gap. That's a regular segment deletion. I'll just undo. You can do the same thing holding Alt or Option, and Premiere Pro will close the gap. That's a ripple delete. There's lots of ways of achieving the same thing. Most editors settle on one way mainly to work. So my advice is that you try lots of different approaches and see what feels most intuitive for you, and then just stick with that, because the main thing is that you can focus on your creative process.